Hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Crafting with Christina on the Two Scrapbook Friends YouTube page. Hope everybody is doing well. So today we are going to be doing, I'm just calling this the Wish Flower Card. So we're actually going to be doing watercoloring today. I'm just going to kind of just show you what we're doing, and then I'm going to go through everything that you're going to need. So this is the card that we're going to be creating. What we are using is Tailored Expressions Picked Posies Stamp and Die Set. So let's just pull this out here. So here's all your dies that come with it. And here, I'll hold it up here so you can see it nicer. Here's all your flower stamps that we're going to be using. So they've got stamps and dies. So we're going to be using this today. And again, it's called Picked Posies by Tailored Expressions. We're going to be doing, again, standard A2 card. So 4.25 by 5.5. You're going to be needing score tape or liquid glue. You're definitely going to need liquid glue today because you're going to have to glue all this stuff down. But score tape, you can either put your back piece on by score tape or liquid glue, whatever you choose. You're going to need 110 pound Nina white cardstock for your card base. You're going to need some craft paper today. So this is craft paper. If you're looking it up, it's craft paper. It's actually with a K. You're going to need either watercolor paper or the Vicki Boutin Foundations paper. Today I'm actually going to be using an actual watercolor paper, but if you have the Vicki Boutin, the mixed media, the white foundations paper, that works just as well because it's actually meant for mixed media. So watercolor works on that just fine. You're going to need black ink. It must be waterproof ink. So I'm going to use the jet black ink because if you read on the back, it does say waterproof. And you're going to need either a paintbrush. I'm going to use, got some paintbrushes here and some water. If you would rather and you have a water pen, you can totally use that as well too, your water brush. That's fine. You're going to need watercolor paints. I'm actually using real watercolor paints today. So what I'm using is the watercolor palette from the Stamp Market. So these are the colors I'm going to be using today. I know if you guys follow my other lives and stuff, I've done lots of watercoloring. If you choose to use like oxides or inks, you guys can, smoosh your inks on your craft mat or your glass mat and actually watercolor with those. But today I'm actually going to use the watercolor palette. Okay, so I'm actually also using a stencil today. So the background of the card we're doing with a stencil. So the stencil that I'm using, and you can use any one you want, but the one I'm using is by Tailored Expressions, and it's called Striped Squares. So that, and as you can see, it is a little, because it's quite, you got all your little squares, your little pieces that move around a lot. So you're definitely going to want to use pixie spray today. So if you have your pixie spray, that is a light tack. It's a repositional adhesive for stencils. So when it's down, it's not going to move around a lot. So if you have your pixie spray, I would highly recommend that. We're also going to be using white ink. I'm using, let's just move here. I'm using the Yeti ink from Lawn Fawn. I think it's Hero Arts that also Two Scrapbook Friends has in as well too. So some white pigment ink. You can use any sentiment you want, but I'll just show you what I'm using. So I'm using the Wish sentiment here. I'll pull this out so you can see it a little bit better. So it's by Photoplay. And it's Say It With Stamps. So I'm using the Wish one. We're using a couple things, and we're also using, because they also come with dies. So we're actually going to be using the dies today, not the Wish stamp, but we are using one little sentiment from on there. And then you need to, if you have these as well too, just to cut them out perfect, you're going to need your little stamps. Now these are, dies. You can buy these, actually come separate, but they work perfect with every single Say It With stamp that Photoplay has as well. So these are all the different sizes. So you probably, if you don't have those, you definitely want to invest in those as well. We're going to use some foam squares because we're just, if you choose to, because we're just going to kind of make their flowers stand up a little bit. And on the background, if you can see, I'm actually going to be using the Avery Elle white ink spray. You're going to want a MISTI tool, and it wouldn't put it on one page, so I had to flip it. You want either a glass mat or a craft mat or something, because when you're doing your spraying, you just want to make sure you don't explode your spray everywhere. So these are the basic things that you're going to need. So if you need to pause it right now and get all your stuff together, by all means, this is what we're going to be using today. So let's get started. First things first, the white ink spray, the ink spray for sure, but the white ink takes a little bit to dry. It stays wet for quite a long time. So we're actually going to do the background before we do all your watercoloring first. So first thing you're going to want to do is actually, let's start with your basic thing. You want to do your card base. I'm going to move all this stuff off to the side for now. And what you're going to want to do is get your card base. So the Nino 80 110 pound comes in an 8.5 by 11 sheet. You're just going to cut it in half, and then you've got your card base right here. And then you can just fold it. You can actually score it. That's what I usually do, but I just didn't do it this time. You can score it if you choose to in your trimmer or whatever score you have. And then you're just going to take your bone folder. That's why this bone folder, this Teflon bone folder I use from Lawn Fawn, is so amazing that half the time I don't even bother putting a score down the center because it just does beautifully. So now you've got your card base. You're just going to put that off to the side. Next thing you want to do is grab your craft sheet. And if you look at the card here, it's a little bit smaller than your background. So what you're going to do, and I started already cutting it, but I thought I would cut it on with you guys, is you're going to be cutting it down at 4 inches. So you're going to line it up to 4 inches, make your cut. Just that I've already done that. And then you're going to flip it over. And then because your standard is 5.5, and I want to do a 1/4 inch smaller, you're going to go down to 5 1/4. And then you're going to make your slice up there. So now you've got your craft paper, and it's a little bit smaller. So now you're going to have that white edge. So now what you want to do is, now when you want to grab your whatever one you're using, as I said, I'm using striped squares, and you want to either grab, well, whatever you want to do. I guess I didn't write that down, but I always like to use my Make Art station when I do these, so that I have the magnets that hold this piece down here. So what you want to do is you want to grab your pixie spray, which mine is pretty much empty. And then you're going to take on the back of your stencil, you can see that there's writing on the front of it, so you can actually read it. And you're just going to do a little, maybe not quite as much as I have, but the first part didn't come out because mine is pretty much empty. So this is going to make it nice and tacky. So what you want to do, wait about, 20, 30 seconds. And then you're going to line it up on your paper just so that it's centered. So we're going to center it. This looks good. So now, as you can see, when you pull this up, your paper sticks to it. That's why the pixie spray is great. None of these little lines are moving, so everything is all nicely put down. Now you're going to grab your magnets. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, it's called a Make Art station. It is absolutely fantastic. If you do a lot of stenciling like I do, then you just have to make sure that like this, I don't know, you have something that's going to hold your stencils down. And this is the best magnetic thing ever. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my white. And I do have a separate brush for my whites. Instead of, I know I have all the Tailored Expressions brushes. I ended up buying this before they put the new white ones out, so I didn't bother getting a new white and black one. So all you're going to do is, again, move your magnets around. Okay, and you're just going to nicely kind of make circular motions over your stencil here. You just keep dabbing, adding a little bit more ink. Now the top looks good. You can just go over it if you think you're missing any. And this is going to nicely soak into your paper, but as I said, it takes a little bit of time to dry. So that's why I wanted to make sure between this and the, actually we're going to do the white spray at the end because I do want it a little bit on the flowers. Okay, so now this part's done. You can move your other magnet. And you see, all I'm doing is just holding down, and I just have the magnets and the pixie spray holding this down, and now nothing's moved. So now you're done with this. You're going to put these off to the side. I love pulling off my stencils. It's the best part. And now you have this beautiful background. So now what you want to do is I have a little fuzz on it. Take the little fuzzy piece off. Anyways, I'll do it better when it dries. Anyway, so now you want to just put this off to the side, and you can move this. You just clean it whenever you're done. Again, the white ink doesn't stain or anything on it, so you've still got plenty of time. You can do this later. Okay, so next thing what we want to do is we're going to start watercoloring. So you're going to grab your Misty or whatever stamping tool and everything that you have, and now you're going to grab your watercolor paper. Okay, I'm going to put my white ink away because I don't need that anymore. So now you're going to grab your watercolor paper and grab your stamps. Oh, it's a little bit taller. I actually have to cut this piece down. Bear with me 1 second. That should do it. Yep, that's perfect. Okay, so now here we can see that we're going to actually use this stamp. We're using the tall one and then a couple of the leaves. So you're going to have to stamp this guy out twice. And then we're going to do the leaves, and you're going to have to do one of the leaves twice. Okay, so we've got here. Now we're also using the small and the large one. So when you do these, you just kind of got to let them fall, because this one isn't too bad, but the taller one, you just have to let it fall because you don't want to move it around too much. Otherwise, it does not line up very well with the die, right? So when you're ready to do this, just kind of let it drop. You can kind of pick it up and move it around a little bit, but don't touch it too much because it's going to fall into the right spot. Now, if you're concerned about it, then what you want to do now is just grab your tall die. I mean, we're not using the whole thing anyway, so if it isn't perfectly lined up, it's fine. But this is just kind of a trick that I've learned, that you just want to make sure. And I can see from here that if I leave it exactly there, it's going to line up just fine. Okay, so now I'm going to use my big bar one. Put this down here. So now you want to pick up your stamps, and you want to use whatever watercolor. As I said, I used the Lawn Fawn Jet Black, but whatever watercolor ink, black ink, waterproof black ink you're going to use. And you want to do that right now. Okay. And I usually like to stamp mine twice just because, like, this is fine, but I want to make sure that the black is definitely dark. So I'm going to make sure I stamp this nice and push that down nice and hard. Much better. And now I know that I need this one again. So I'm going to re-stamp this guy up here. And I'm not cleaning off mine because I know it's not going to move too much. Okay, now I'm also going to re-stamp this one again. And then we're good. So take your chamois, whatever you clean off your stamps. The other guys, it's nice and squeaky. So now these guys can get put away because you are done with these. Let's just put these guys back on their spot. And this leaf is done. Okay, so now you're just going to pick up the last two pieces that you need. And again, use your black ink. And I'm going to stamp these twice. Now, I would recommend, I like doing, even when I color, never mind watercoloring anything, I actually do it on the paper before I cut out my pieces. I just find it a little bit easier instead of trying to hold on to tiny little pieces like with your fingernail or something. I like to color everything on here, and then we'll cut them all out. So now you've got all your pieces here. put these away. Now you can put your Misty away. Now's the time to either grab your water brush, or if you're going to be doing, I'm actually going to be using regular paintbrushes, just making sure I'm still in focus here. Okay, so now you're going to grab, whether or not you're using inks. If you're using inks, now grab whatever ink you are, kind of smush it onto your glass mat or your craft mat or whatever you're using. I'm not using any of that stuff right now just because it's still on the paper, so it's not going anywhere or anything. But if I was using regular inks or anything like that, you kind of smush it, add some water to it, and then you can start watercoloring with it. So I'm actually just going to start, I'll just do the leaves right away. I like to add just like a little bit of water onto where I'm watercoloring, just so that the paper is already kind of nice and wet. And then you're going to add, I'm going to use leafy. Right, so you're just going to pick up a little bit. If you need a little bit darker, you can just add more ink. Just make sure that you have this nice and, there we go, a little bit more water into it. There we go. And you can just pull that along. If you have enough on there, you don't even really need to dip it too much. So make sure you have enough water. Now, it doesn't matter if the water pools in here, because when it's dry, it just goes back right into your regular ink. So it's not a big deal. Now you can see this one, I didn't add water to it first, and really and truly, when you're doing small things like this, it really doesn't matter, because you're not going to be doing a lot of shading. Now that we have the green out, I am going to add water to this. I just find that it makes it a little bit nicer if you add water to it, instead of just trying to color. If you color right onto it without adding water, it's just going to be that dark green, and it's not going to flow nice. So again, we're going to go into the leafy. If you want it to be darker, then you can totally do that. So I'm just going to kind of basically pick up some color and dab it onto the water that I already had. And I just want it to dry like that. Because when I watercolor, it doesn't need to be perfectly right to the edges. I like this kind of look. Okay, so now we're going to just do the rest of the leaves. And you are going to have to let this dry. We probably, I would assume it's not going to be dry before we are ready to cut it out. Normally, I would sometimes put it aside. But so long as you have a heat tool, then you're good to go. Okay, so we're just going to grab a little bit more of that leafy, and I'm just basically pulling it out of here, and I'm just kind of dotting it around. And then it's just, the water is going to take it, and it's just going to flow it. That's perfect. Because we're going to go back in with a little bit of a darker color as well. I should probably hold this up on here just so you can kind of take a peek and see as well. Okay, so again, you're going to add water. And I like quite a bit of water on here, so long as it stays inside the leaf. If the water goes outside of the leaf, chances are the color is going to go outside. So again, this is just something you just practice with and play. Okay, so we've got a little bit more leafy on here. I'm just telling you the colors that I'm using just in case you have the palette. Okay. So we're going to let that dry just a tiny little bit, just so that's not super, super watery. And then we're actually going to go in and add some mossy. We can probably go back into the top stuff. It's still wet, and you don't want it to be completely dry, or you can still add more water. So it depends. You can now dry it and then add your second layer. Or if you want, just add some water to your mossy. Just so that I'm going to hold this up here, you can see a little bit better. Do you see what I mean? Like, you're going to add enough water just to make it kind of the water pool on the top so the color comes out. And now I'm going to see if I can hold this up. So this is why I like to do it when it's wet. Do you see what I mean? Like, you just put it on here and it just kind of moves around, because I don't want this to be perfect. I just want a little bit of green down at the bottom that moves into the top. And that's all I want to do with that. And then you just let that dry, just so that it has a little bit of dimension on it. Just so you have a little bit. And that's why I like to do it at when you've got water still from earlier on there. And if not, you just add a little bit more water to it. and just paint onto the bottom. And I like the watercolor because it just moves, and watercolor does whatever it does. There's, as I said, you're never ever going to be able to do it the same way twice. It's impossible. Because watercolor, when you're adding water, it has a mind of its own. But I think these are just going to dry beautifully. Now, if you're worried about putting your hand in here, then just grab your heat tool. If you don't have a heat tool, you're just going to have to let it dry. But I have like my embossing gun, my heat tool here. So just in case, you know, you end up putting your hand or something in it, just lightly take your heat tool. And this is just basically a cheating way for to let your watercolor dry. And because the water is still a little bit on there, it actually moves it up and down. So if you were not to have a heat gun, you just put it aside for, I don't know, maybe half an hour, come back. It's going to soak into your paper and it just dries it beautifully. Heat gun does the same thing. It just speeds up your process. Isn't that gorgeous? So now if for some reason you think you want to add more lighter, once it's dry, you just go back in and you can just repeat what you did and it just basically layers it on top. But I like the look of this. Okay, so now we're going to go into, we're going to actually do the petals. So I'm going to go in with bubble gum to start with, but I'm going to add quite a bit of water just to the petals. I'm not going to go up into the top of it yet. We're just going to add water into the petals just so that it moves around really nice. Okay. So when you're painting with your water brush or you can go to the edge, wherever you want the paint to go, that's where you put water in it, because it won't go outside of that. Okay, so now I'm going to grab bubble gum. So I'm going to add a little bit more water into my bubble gum here. Now I have some on my paintbrush, and I'm just going to kind of tap it around in places here. Because I put a lot of water down, I want to tap it onto the top, but then I just kind of want to pull it in here because I just want a little bit of light pink. I don't want a massive amount to start with. And then if you think, okay, there's not enough, you start adding a little bit more. And then you can always clean off your brush so that you're not adding more of that pink, but you can just start pulling it down. So it depends how pink you want your posies to be. So I'm going to start with that right now. Then I know I want a little bit more in the center. So I'm going to start just adding a little bit more, just dropping a few colors of pink. And then you can kind of bring it down here just because that's, you can see where that's where a little bit of shading would be. So I'm going to let that little bit dry because I'm actually going to go back in with the burgundy. So we can drop that on right now and actually see what it looks like. So you're just going to add some water into your burgundy. I just want it to add just a little bit of a deeper color. So you're going to pop that down, but because it's still wet, that's what I thought. It's not going to show up quite enough yet. So you're going to let that dry. So we're actually going to go into the other one. You're going to paint, add a bunch of water, and you're just basically going to paint your posy here. And just add a little bit of bubble gum, start at the top. And if you think you still have enough on your brush, then take that off and then start just pulling it down. If you don't have a lot on your brush, you can start pulling it down just to begin with. So you just kind of want to just pull it down until you have exactly the color that you want. You can just add more bubble gum onto the top of this here. Pull it down into a few spots just so it kind of has that shading look. If you want some down there, however you want to do it. Okay, so now this one's moved over a little bit. Now you can see. So that's the thing, is watercolor is going to do wherever the water, so because my card, now I can move it back up again. Now do you see when I moved it back up, it doesn't, because there was no water up in here, the water's not going to go there. So now I'm going to actually grab some of my burgundy now and see if some of this, oh, there we go. Do you see how nice that looks? So now you're going to grab your burgundy and you're going to touch it on here. And it's just going to add that little bit of depth. If you want it to go down, you can move it down. You can move it up. That's only if you have enough water onto your paper. So again, we're going to do it on here as well. Just going to hold this up so you can see it a little bit better. So now is when you want to kind of come into your dark colors. And if you have enough water on there, it moves it around. So that's how you kind of get the different colors and the depth onto here. Now I would recommend, actually it looks like I need a tiny little bit more bubble gum on here. I want this to be a little bit darker into the red. So play around with it until you like the look of it. I'm gonna put a little bit more shading down here, shading down here, and now we're good. So now you're gonna dry this guy up again. Again, you can let it sit, but I would recommend letting this dry before you start getting into the top yellow, because you don't want this to be wet and then it goes into the yellow, because that will definitely ruin the effect. So you want to make sure that your posies are dry. As you can know, you can see that there's enough water on here. It's actually pushing this around. But definitely get this posy part dry before you start doing the top. The more water you put on there, of course, the longer it's going to take to dry, but this heat tool makes a huge difference. There, that's gorgeous. Okay, almost dry. You can actually see it, and not that you can see it on there, but you can see it when you're putting it over. There we go, that it's drying. Okay, so now we're going to do the top. So I'm just going to add water into the top here. Add a little bit water into the top here. I added too much water. I don't want that much. So if you've added, you just grab a piece of paper towel or something, or it just globbed there. And I know that if there's too much, the yellow, because I really want it to be vibrant. So you just want a little bit of water on there. You don't have to put too much, because otherwise the yellow is not going to stand out. So now you're going to add, I'm using citrine, whatever it's called. And you're just going to actually go over top of that whole top piece here. And because you've actually added water there, you probably don't even really need to put much onto the top here. So now you've got your yellow. And you see how I did those little dots on there? You cannot do that when it's wet. So once you're finished painting, watercoloring with your yellow, you want to dry that, because otherwise those little dots will definitely not show up. Now you do not want to add water onto these top yellow pieces again to make those little dots, because that will not work. So make sure this is completely dry. Otherwise it's just going to go kind of make it mushy. So then what I did with this one is I used Rusty. So you do need to add not a massive amount. You just need to have a little bit of water on the tip of your brush. You don't want a lot. And you just kind of want to touch it into the Rusty just to get enough that it's going to add a tiny little bit of color. And then you just want to lightly touch it into spots. So you're just basically just picking up enough and just touching it down to give those little spots at the top. That's all you need to do. So don't add a lot of water to it. Otherwise, you just need to basically add just enough water to pick up the color. There we go. And that's all you need to do for that. So the flowers are now done. What you do want to do though is flip this around, and you can just let this dry. You can use your heat gun, whatever you want to do on it as well too. But we want to do, and now I'm going to pull out my glass mat because I don't want it to, I might make a bit of a mess. I just know it has a glare, so I didn't want to pull that out earlier. I'm going to move this off to the side for a moment. Okay, so now we're going to pull the glass mat out, because what I want to do here is, do you see how I have the wish here in the same pinks that I did this? So now you're just going to grab your water brush or your paintbrush. I'm going to use a bigger one this time. You're just going to kind of watercolor, or just water over the whole bottom section. Don't get into over here. You just want to do a nice bunch of water here. Now you want to make sure you have enough. So grab, because we're using the back piece of, like the bigger piece of the wish. So you just kind of hold it and going, okay, that's going to work just fine. And then now you want to grab your bubble gum, right? You can see I have enough water on here because now it's starting to just move around a little bit, and you just kind of want to move it back and forth. Just so that it's enough that that your wish comes through. So now you get to choose. Do you want it bright? Do you want it a lot lighter? If you're starting to do it and you think, oh my goodness, that's so incredibly dark, grab more water. See, the more water you have, the lighter it goes. So you can push around. You just have to make sure you have enough piece here now that that's going to fit your wish piece. So that's fine, but I'm actually going to add a little bit more because this one was very light. I'm going to see what it looks like with some spots that have a little bit darker tinge to it. Just so when I die cut it, some of it's going to be light, some of it's going to be dark. I'm going to add a little bit of raspberry into some of this. I'm just curious to see what this is going to look like when it's printed out. So I just add some of that darker raspberry into it. If you think it's too much, add more water and just kind of move it around. That's the best part about watercolor. I'm going to clean off my brush here. And I'm going to put a little bit more bubble gum on top. And I think that's going to be good. Okay, so now you've got all that done. So definitely going to need to use the heat gun on this. And make sure your little spots, mine are already dry, it doesn't take long. But you're definitely going to want to do this before you start putting through this through your die cut machine. You want to make sure that this is completely dry. And as I said, it doesn't matter if it's a mess or not, because you're only going to see that little bit into the corner underneath the wish. I like to sometimes dry it from the back. Sometimes your paper will curl, just so you know that is completely normal. Sometimes if you flip it around and do some from the back and then go back around to the front, it actually straightens out your paper a little bit. But once you put it through the die cut machine, you don't even notice it because you're just cutting out a little bit of it anyways. Okay, so now you're all set with this. So now you want to grab your dies from your Posies set. Okay, and now we're going to cut everything out. Now we're going to put it all together. So I like to use purple tape, or you can use washi tape, whatever you want, just to hold it. So now you can see, because I checked all this before, I know that this piece fits just great. So now I'm going to grab all my other pieces out here. I'm not using any of the big flowers. I will show you a card at the end. So if you want to, if you wanted to stamp out all of them, play around with watercolors, you can definitely do that. Okay. So I don't need this one. I don't need this one. I need the small guy here. And I like to add purple tape so that nothing moves, because now that you've done all this work, that would be really bad if things moved around. And and things messed up when you put it through your die cut machine. That would not be so nice. Okay. So you've got this guy down. You're obviously going to have to run it through twice because you need to cut these guys out after again. Okay, so now we've got this. It's a lot harder to do when I can't look right over top of it. And you may as well grab, so you're using, there's two wish ones here. So you've got your smaller, the inside, that's going to be the white. You want your bigger piece on here. So now you're going to line it up and make sure it's all within the pink. I'm just going to put some on this side, some on this side. And I'm not using these. So let's just put these off to the side as well. Now you're going to grab, and I'm just going to move this mat off to the side just for a moment. So now you're going to grab whatever die cut machine you're using. I always use the Gemini. I bought this when they came out, and oh my goodness, it's amazing. There is no more hand cranking anything. So here's my regular sandwich. You need your 2 pieces. So you've got your back mat, then you've got your plastic shim, your magnetic board. And if you're using a Gemini, make sure it's upside down so that the die pieces do not cut into your magnet plate. Then you're going to put your final plastic piece on top, your cutting plate. No hand cranking. You're just going to take it out of here. Put this off to the side for a second because we need to grab these pieces. Now you can take all these pieces off. And then we're just going to have to so we're going to put these off to the side for a moment, because then you just have to cut out your other 2 pieces. So now you're going to grab your wish piece. So that is going to be absolutely gorgeous. It almost looks like a tie-dye look. It's kind of neat, eh? So you can put all your pieces aside here. Okay. And get rid of all this stuff. Put these down here. Just going to put all the tape off to the side. Keep this piece of tape because once you've pulled the purple tape off, and be careful, don't rip it really fast, because I mean, if you're ripping things really fast, it will probably rip your paper. So you just have to nicely put it down and just nicely take it off. Just nice and slow. When you have pieces like this is not a big deal, but okay. I need this one. Now you want to grab, if there's enough room on this page, let's check, because you need to have your wish pulled out. Oh, that works. I was going to say you can grab a white sheet of paper. I would do, like, you don't necessarily have to. This is kind of more of an off-white. So you can do it on this one, or if you have an 80-pound Nina, you can do that as well too. So it's totally up to you. I'm just going to do it on here because I have space. Okay, so this is all, oops. I thought that tape got wet and it did, so it's not sticking very well. Let's just grab a new piece. Okay. Now flip this. Oops, this guy moved too. If you have problems like that, take your magnet sheet and then just put it down and then flip it, and then it won't move. Okay. So again, now you're just going to grab whatever die cutting machine, and you're just going to cut out your last piece. All right. So now you've got all your pieces cut. Now do you see when we do the wish one here, don't lose your eye, but do you see how much smaller this is? So now this is going to attach, once you pull all your pieces out, and then you've got your 2-layer here. I'm just going to push this aside because I don't want to lose my eye. We're going to pull that back out in a second. Let's just get all these pieces out. On here. Okay. I'm just going to push this over here so I don't forget where it is. So now we're just going to put this thing together. So now you're going to grab your card base. You're going to grab your piece that you already did, and now it's definitely dry. Now you can either use, I always just use score tape. I really like score tape. It doesn't matter what size. I just happen to have still a roll of the massive stuff. But the reason I like using score tape is because you never have to worry about your card coming apart if you're sending it in the mail or something. I mean, sure, glue is fine too, but score tape, it's there forever. It will never, ever, ever unstick. This stuff is crazy. Okay. So you're going to put this down here. I'm going to grab my tweezers. I like using tweezers. You can use your fingernails too, but I tell you, a good pair of sharp tweezers makes a massive amount of difference. Okay, so I know my card opens like this. Doesn't matter as much when you put this down right now, but oh yeah, I forgot to get that fuzzy off. Okay, fuzzy's off. Now you're going to center it onto your back page, onto your card base. Okay, So now you're gonna play around with where you want your pieces. So I know that I want the small one because you are gonna end up having to cut some of these off because that's way too tall. Unless you want your flower way up here, that's totally fine. But I'm going to cut mine off here. And I think the smaller one is probably going to be okay. I'm actually going to cut a little bit off this one as well too. So now is when you want to use your glue tube. I always use the Lawn Fawn. I just like it because it has a smaller point. So now you're just going to put a little bit of glue on the back here. Figure out where you want to place it. I'm just going to put it right about there. Now I'm going to grab my longer piece. And I'm going to put it right about here. Now you're going to grab your 3 pieces that you have here. These guys are going to be next. And you just kind of want to figure out where you want to place them. I mean, you can, whoops, my glue. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but at least I shut my window, but my neighbor is now mowing their lawn. So if you can hear the lawnmower, sorry. Okay, so I'm just gonna put this guy somewhere right about here. I think it's perfect. Then, oh, you can see, take your little pieces out from your die cuts here. Okay, grab your more glue. And you can see I just kind of smush it on. I'm not too particular when I do stuff like that. Okay, now you're just gonna put him down here. Now I like this piece up here, but you're best to put this piece down, then kind of put it underneath. I just found that a little bit easier. So I'm gonna grab, where did I put it? I'm gonna grab my big foam squares and I'm just gonna put one piece on the back here. That's really all you need. Okay, so now you're just gonna push this guy down. I'm gonna put him right about there. Then you're gonna grab your next one. Put this down here. And he's gonna sit right along this edge right there. Now you're just gonna grab your last piece. If you choose to put this piece on, of course, it's totally up to you. I just thought it gave a little bit more, and now I'm just gonna stick it in behind. There we go. So now we've got this part down. Now all you want to do is grab, so when you're doing your wish, you can use the Lawn Fawn. I also have this little bottle that I fill up with just liquid glue because it has a very, very, very tiny tip to it. The Lawn Fawn will, and I mean, even if you get it on the outside of it or whatever and it gets a little smushy, it'll dry clear anyway, so it's not a big deal. But I really like to use this tiny little nozzle on here and then just trace along. There we go. And then you're just going to center it on the wish that you already cut out earlier. And do a little blob at the top. And now you want to make sure you grab your little, actually I'm going to use my tweezers, pop it out first. Grab my little tweezers and I'm just going to put my little eye on top. There we go. So now you can grab your glue tube, put that down, and you're just going to add this somewhere, wherever you decide to need to put it. Now, when we did this wish, I'm just going to actually use another little piece on here. So what you want to do is grab whatever white paper, any other paper you've got laying around, whatever you did your wish in, you're going to want to stamp your other little spot with the same. So I use the watercolor paper. So now you're going to grab your Misty back out. Now you're almost done. I'm just going to move this off here for a second. So now you're going to grab your Misty here and put this down here. And you can use whatever sentiment you want. I'm just going to do the same as I did. So it says, wish you were here. But there is so many amazing sentiments on any of these Say It With stamps. They're quite unbelievable. If you choose to do it in pink, like you can match it that as well too. It's totally up to you. You can put it in the pink and have that black background on there. So again, grab your black ink. I'm just going to use the Lawn Fawn because that's what I've got handy here. And just to make sure that it's nice and dark, clean it off, put it away because you don't want to lose those little pieces. And then this is where these things come in handy. So let's just move this out of the way. And because then you can choose, like if you decide you're going to be, you want it a little bit bigger because you want to put some Nouveau drops or something on the sides of it, you choose whatever size you want, right? Like you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. There's all different sizes. So I'm going to use this one because I want it to be nice and close. So again, we're just going to center this so you can see it right over top. Put this down. And then I'm actually just going to quickly cut it without pulling my Gemini back out because it's kind of out of the way now. I'm just going to move it down here. So now you're going to cut your sentiment out. Now you have a couple choices. I pop mine up so that they're nice and they're popped up with the same depth as this. So let's pull this guy back out here. So what I really like, I'm going to put this back on here. What I really like for when you do these smaller sentiments, Tailored Expressions has their foam sticky strips. So they come in strips like this, and they are absolutely perfect for these things. So I probably don't need one much bigger than this, but you can, if you wanted the exact right size, you can kind of just pull it off. You know, you're just going to make it. So you just have a little strip. They are the perfect size. You're just going to put this, because it's two-sided, of course, right? So you've got this. Just push it down so it sticks to it. Then you're just going to stick it down to wherever you want on your card. And now we're almost done. The last little bit we're going to do, and if you choose to, you don't have to. You totally can. I'm going to grab my glass mat back here again because I like that little white spray along the edge. So move this stuff off to the side here. Right, so I'm using the Avery Elle white ink spray. So you just got to give it a little bit of a shake. And then you can, if you want, spray it. I actually never use the spray very often. I like to take it apart, just kind of take most of it off, just kind of dab it off to the side. And all you're going to do is you're actually just going to tap it. And you could have done this before, but I really wanted that little white splatter on top of my flowers as well. And I didn't want it everywhere. I just want a little bit here and going, and that's all you got to do is just tap it. I just find it a little bit easier to do than trying to spray it because it's going to go everywhere. And that's why I say use your glass mat, because now that's easy to clean because you got white spots everywhere. But other than that, your card is now finished. So here's the first one. Do you see what I mean? Like, as I said, you will never have the same card twice because this one is definitely darker and darker leaves than this one. So I should say, do not touch your card. Put it aside to dry because this white ink spray, unless of course you're going to take your heat gun to it, but you don't really need to now. It takes a bit to dry. When the ink spray dries, it has the most beautiful texture to it. It dries beautifully. The texture is amazing on there. But anyways, that just gives you an idea of the fun things you can do with this Tailored Expressions painted posies. Just pull that back out again for you so you can see it one more time. Put it up the right way. So yeah, it's Tailored Expressions. Oh, sorry, not painted. Picked Posies is what this one's called. Sorry. Picked Posies. And again, if you want to do, get into more watercoloring and use some more of this, I'll just quickly show you, like I went into reds and yellows, and this is what I did with doing, I actually add a little bit of black into it just to give it a little bit more dimension, and splattered the background on a white card and just used the hello sentiment from Tailored Expressions as well. And I just watercolored all those, add some stickles into some prettiness in the center, and there's just a whole other watercolor card with using more of the stamps. So anyways, hopefully you guys had a little bit of fun playing along, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.